You remember this? Do you remember when you made that for Mama?
I made this in Miss Wilson's class.
That's right. You was always so thoughtful to your mom. That's why I'm so glad you home.
All praise, honor, and glory to the great and one and only Elohim of Israel. Shalom and blessings to all my brothers and sisters, my kinsmen, according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom pertain the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the law, the services of Elohim, and the promises, whose are the fathers, and of whom is concerned the flesh of Mashiach came, who is over all Elohim blessed. Hope all is good and well. Welcome to this fellowship to provoke them to jealousy. What are we talking about tonight? To provoke them to jealousy. Y'all got to forgive me if I take some short pauses here. I just got through eating, so y'all know how that go. I want to thank the Most High for all his blessings, all his goodness toward us in these times. We're going to be dealing with to provoke them to jealousy. The other day, we did a video dealing with Romans, the 11th chapter, proving that Romans 11 is addressed to Israelites only. And I got some feedback on that video in the comment section on my particular channel. You know, somebody, of course, not in agreement. Their point of contention was my misunderstanding, according to their view, my misunderstanding of pronouns. When you read Revelations 11, verse 13 and 14. We're going to probably revisit some of that. I want to get deeper into that, but I want to sort of revisit Romans 11 tonight. But real quick, I want to get some feedback from y'all in the chat. We're all familiar with when the Most High said he was going to provoke them to jealousy because of how they provoked him to anger by serving other gods. When he said that he would provoke them to jealousy, and when Paul quoted that from Deuteronomy 32, from you all's point of view, why was he provoking them to jealousy? Excuse me. Why was he provoking them to jealousy? Was it to save them, try to save them? Or was it to bring destruction on them? Was this provoking to jealousy? Excuse me. Is it talking about how people say the Israelites was provoked to jealousy with the Gentiles, and then, you know, it was for the purpose of saving the Israelites later? or is this provoking to jealousy, talking about something else in particular? What y'all think about that? I'm gonna greet the chat and hopes of some feedback on that. Brother Yohanan, Romans 11, 31, 32. Even so have these also now not believed, that through your mercy they also may obtain mercy. For God hath concluded them all in unbelief, that he might have mercy upon all. Indeed, that's going to be real prevalent as we get into this discussion. And as always, you right on time with the scripts, bro. Hope you're doing well. Mikael, Yashara, shalom to you. Good to see you in the chat. Zuriah, Bat, Yisrael, shalom to you. Hope all is good and well. Not too much for you, shalom. Hope all is good and well. Hold on. Got Sister Pam, Yah, Yisrael, shalom to you. Hope all is good and well. Thank y'all for chiming in. Up next, shalom to you. I still haven't looked at that article yet. I'm gonna check that one out, but I'm gonna look at it and let you know what I think about the article. I still haven't forgot about that. Up next. Good to see you in the chat. Shalom to my love, Shibriya. Hope all is well. So I'm gonna go ahead and just get right into it. I want to start with Romans 11. We dealt with Romans 11 last time, and we started from the top and read down, sort of examining these verses, looking at certain words within the verses that stand out and phrases that stand out to lead us to a better understanding of what Paul was trying to convey. Because we know we have an unction in the Bible concerning Paul's writings and how difficult they are to understand. And they're not to be underestimated or taken lightly or arbitrarily, right? He said, look for the foolish nation of nations behind Christianity and Judaism, and there you have your culprit, indeed. But when we look at Romans, right, Romans 11, we were able to conclude that most of this is pretty much dealing with what pertains to Israel for the most part. Then we went to Romans 9 and we showed how, like for instance, in verse 5 of Romans 11, even so then at this present time, we showed how Paul was addressing those during his present time. So all of this is significant and sort of giving us a setup of what's going on. Why was Paul addressing those at that present time, or why is he using this terminology? It was because during that present time, the gospel was being preached and spread throughout all the nations. You know, preaching the gospel to all the creatures under heaven. All that was done already during Paul's day. So you're dealing with a dispensation of time. During Paul's time and our time, we're dealing in a different time, and the Bible prophesies of our time. But Paul is speaking of his present time. He said there's a remnant according to the election of grace. And so we looked at the election and we showed in Romans 9. Matter of fact, let's just go there real quick. I'll just scale back. In Romans 9, this is what it says about the election. It says, for this is the word of promise. Well, I'll start at 9. For this is the word of promise. I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life, and lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. So this is the word of promise, and it's in quotations. And this word of promise pertains to Sarah giving birth to a son, which we know is Isaac. Verse 10 goes on, and not only this, right? Meaning that the word of promise was not only pertaining to Sarah having a son, but when Rebekah also had conceived by one, even by our father Isaac, right? For the children being not yet born, right? What children? Talking about Isaac being born from Sarah and Jacob being born from Isaac. For the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of Elohim according to election might stand. So we can run all through the scriptures to see who the elect are. But verse 9 sums it up if we reading it in context, who the election is. The election had to do with the seed of promise from Abraham to his promised seed, Isaac, then on to Jacob, then on to Jacob's children for a covenant according to the election, right? Because Israel is the elect of the Most High. So when we go down to Romans, when he says, even so at this present time, also there is a remnant according to the election of grace. We know who the election is, right? And we know who grace and mercy is given to. What's going on, Brother Yash?
Yeah, shalom, shalom. Yeah, nothing much. Chop it up a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not going to be too much long. I mean, I just wanted to touch on this real quick because, you know, Romans 11 is a deep chapter. It's one of the go-to chapters for Christianity and the Christian belief, what most of us grew up in. So it's been something I've been on real heavy for the past couple of weeks or so, just examine it and re-examine it, just trying to see if we can get it right. But Romans 11:5 at this present time. So Paul's talking about that present time and the remnant, right, according to the election of grace during his present time. So a lot of people will read verses like this and misapply them, misappropriate them, thinking that because it says this, that it applies to our time as well. But we live in a different dispensation of time that Paul was living in. Paul was speaking of the end time, right? And we know that we have an end time which pertains to us. But before 70 AD, leading up to 70 AD, that was considered the end time during that particular time. And the Bible divides these times and shows you the difference between these times. We're going to look at it a little bit tonight. You got any thoughts, Brother Yash?
Nah, go ahead. Get started.
He said, this is what I wanted to get to. When we get to verse 11, right? This is where a lot of people come to. It says, I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Elohim forbid. But rather, through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles for to provoke them to jealousy. All right. That's what I want to focus on tonight. If we read down to verse 13 and 14, he says, for I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles. I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I'm apostle of the Gentiles. I magnify mine office if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. Right. Now, we see that verse 11 says that salvation has come to the Gentiles for to provoke them to jealousy. But verse 14 says, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. I did a deep, deep search on this word right here, emulation, and I found some interesting things. Uh, some things that, you know, if we get a chance, we're going to discuss tonight. Like I said, I want to keep this relatively short compared to how we do. Y'all know how we do. But emulation in verse 14, jealousy in verse 11. All right. Now, if we look at verse 11, we see that verse 11 is somewhat of a microcosm of, if we scroll back to chapter 10, verse 19, Romans 11 and verse 11 and Romans 10 and 19 is referencing the same thing. Romans 10 and 19 says, but I say, did not Israel know? First, Moses said, I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. All right. So now my original question was, when the Most High said he's going to provoke them to jealousy and anger, I want to leave verse 14 out of this right now. Verse 14 says, provoke to emulation them which are my flesh. We looked at emulation. Emulation means to, well, we didn't really look at it. Some people posted in the chat, you know, emulation means to mimic or to copy. All right. When you emulate something, you're mimicking it, you're copying it. Some definitions will go deeper and you'll see things like rivalry, to rival something. All right. Or to, there's some definitions that even had jealous, that to emulate means to be jealous. All right. I don't really see the connection with that, but, you know, I guess in some contexts it might make sense, but that's what we got out of emulation. I want to leave verse 14 out of it, though, for now, just for the sake of what we're going to be addressing in particular about the jealousy. We know that jealousy and emulations are two different things, right? And we can prove that if we go to Galatians, the 5th chapter, we see that it mentions the works of the flesh and the works of the spirit, and how the works of the flesh will cause those who operate by those to not inherit the kingdom. We see that among the fruit, the works of the flesh, we see envyings, right? Envy is a form of jealousy. We see also we see emulations. Right. Emulations. So when you look up the word emulation, you'll see a lot of positive things, but then you might see jealousy or you might see envy. And this is more than likely where that falls in, perhaps. Envy in itself is some people will say envy and jealousy is two different things. I would agree with that. Being jealous over something is not necessarily having envy. But if you look this up, it'll say jealousy. Right. So in any case, we're dealing with two different things in essence. So when we go back to Romans 11, Let's go back. Romans 11. It says, I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Elohim forbid. But rather through their fall, salvation has come unto the Gentiles for to provoke them to jealousy. Romans 10:19. But I say, did not Israel know? First Moses said, I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. So when Moses quoted it, or when the Most High quoted it through Moses, he's saying that he's going to provoke them to anger with a foolish nation, right? And to jealousy. But in the context that Paul is putting it in, he's saying that they stumble, that they should fall. God forbid. Or in other words, there's still a chance of hope for them, even in their fall, if they continue not in unbelief. All right. If they continue not in unbelief, then they could be grafted back in. They won't stumble, or their fall will be reversed. The Most High pick them back up. Basically, that's how they fell, through unbelief. It says, but rather through their fall, salvation has come to the Gentiles for to provoke them to jealousy. Right? We looked at an example of this jealousy in Acts the 13th chapter. You want to jump in there, Brother Yash, add something in?
Nah, go ahead, man. I'm sucked into listening.
Okay, Acts 13. Let's look at an example of this jealousy. All right. Where do I want to start? Okay. Acts 13, we read in the beginning. Well, this is when Paul first made it to Antioch, right? Just to sum this up, Paul made it to Antioch, verse 14, and they went into the congregation on the Sabbath day. So they're in Antioch, all right? While they were in the congregation, it said they read from the law and the prophets. The rulers read from the law and the prophets. Excuse me. And then they said, ye men and brethren. All right, so we can conclude that these are Israelite men in this congregation. Ye men and brethren, they read from the law and the prophets. If you have any words of exhortation to say on, then Paul stood up, gave his salutation, and his salutation was, men of Israel, and ye that fear Elohim give audience. So Paul is in Antioch in the congregation addressing Israelites. All right. If we skip down to verse 26, he says, men and brethren, children of the stock of Abraham, and whosoever among you feareth Elohim, to you is this word of salvation sent. Now he's in Antioch, right? His mission is to preach unto the Gentiles, or the uncircumcision. So he's in Antioch addressing men and brethren, children who are of the stock of Abraham, just like he is. He's of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. All right, so this is consistent with his mission. He's in another city outside of Judea, Jerusalem, in Antioch, and he's addressing Israelite men and brethren who are of the stock of Abraham, and he's telling them that this word of salvation is sent unto you. Why? It says, for they that dwell at Jerusalem and their rulers, because they knew him not, nor yet the voices of the prophets, which are read every Sabbath day, they have fulfilled them in condemning him. So in other words, everybody back at Jerusalem, for the most part, the rulers And those who continue to follow the rulers, they have fulfilled the scriptures in rejecting Christ. All right, let me show you real quick. I think that's Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8. Now watch this. In verse 31, it says that he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected of the elders and of the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed after 3 days and rise again. This is what Paul was referencing right here. When we go back to Acts 13, he says, for they that dwell at Jerusalem and their rulers, because they knew him not. He came unto his own, and his own knew him not. All right. Nor yet the voices of the prophets, which are read every Sabbath day, they have fulfilled them in condemning him. So these are two places you can bring people to. Acts 13:26, and then Mark 8:31. For people who want to say that the Israelites rejected Christ. And they sum it up as if all the Jews rejected Christ. There were many Jews who still believed on Christ. You know, if that wasn't the case, Paul wouldn't have had anybody to persecute. A lot of the Jews were believing on Christ. A lot of them fell off, you know, because of different circumstances. And that's why he gave that parable of the seed, you know. But there were many Jews who believed on Christ, but this is who rejected Christ: the elders, the chief priests, the scribes, the rulers, and then along with many of the other people who followed after them, they rejected Christ. But Acts 13, men and brethren, children of the stock of Abraham. So we see this whole chapter who Paul is addressing. He's addressing Israelites. Before he started to speak, the elders in the congregation, they were addressing Israelites, right? Reading the law and the prophets. But when we get to, after Paul preached his message and said everything he said concerning Christ and the law of Moses, in verse 42, it says, when the Jews were gone out of the congregation, the Gentiles besought that these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath. All of a sudden, now we have Gentiles being mentioned here. Right. Now, these Jews, if you read Acts, the 15th chapter, Acts chapter 15, you will see Paul was, where were they at right here? It said after they had passed through Pisidia, they came to Pamphylia. And when they had preached the word in Paphos, they went down to Italia, and they sailed to Antioch, from whence they had been recommended of the grace of Elohim for the work which they fulfilled. Right. So now in Acts 15, they're in Antioch. Now let's go in Acts 14, rather. This is the end of Acts 14. Now let's go into the 15th chapter. It says, and when they were come and had gathered the assembly together, they rehearsed all that Elohim had done with them, and how he had opened the door of faith unto the Gentiles. And there they abode long time with the disciples. In verse 15, it says, and certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren, and said, except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved. So they're in Antioch, and they have men from Judea coming down to these congregations. In all these different places, you have Israelite congregations, and you have Jews coming down from Judea to these congregations, trying to teach them to do things after the manner of Moses or after the letter of the law. This was the main contention. This is what caused Paul to be jealous. I mean, not Paul. This is what caused the let me go back to Acts 13. The Jews, this is what caused the Jews to be jealous when Paul was preaching this gospel of Christ, basically trying to teach them that all those things in the Old Testament were foreshadowing, right? And now we can walk in the newness of the truth and the newness of spirit through Christ and what he did by shedding his blood. We no longer have to do these works. These works don't suffice. They don't cover for your sins. They don't do any of that. And he's bringing them the knowledge of Christ, and they getting jealous, right? But these are all Jews, right? Even these Gentiles were being addressed when these elders stood up, and when Paul stood up, he addressed them all. They were in the congregation hearing all of this. But it said, when the Jews were gone out of the congregation, the Gentiles besought that these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath. Now, when the congregation was broken up, many of the Jews and religious proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who, speaking to them, persuaded them to continue in the grace of Elohim. So you had Jews, right? Which denotes that these were people who were under the law that Paul preached and they believed. And you had religious proselytes, meaning people who turned from one way of belief to another, more than likely idolatry. Right, they're in Antioch, so a lot of our people were there worshiping the gods that they worshiped there. So they were religious proselytes. He persuaded them to continue in the grace. And it says, in the next Sabbath day came almost the whole city together to hear the word of Elohim. But when the Jews saw the multitude, they were filled with envy. So they were provoked to jealousy and anger and envy over the message that Paul was speaking and preaching to them. You had some who believed on it and some who didn't. So they were filled with envy and spake against those things which were spoken by Paul, contradicting and blaspheming. All right. Their belief was that in order for you to be saved, you had to keep the laws of Moses. You had to keep the circumcision. You had to do all these different things in order to be saved and keep the law. When Paul mentioned that they were putting a burden on the people because they themselves weren't really keeping the law. Now he said, look at what Paul said to them. It said, and Paul and Barnabas waxed bold and said it was necessary that the word of Elohim should first have been spoken to you, talking to the Jews. But seeing ye put it from you. Now, why is he saying it should have first been spoken to you? Right? Because these are the people who was set to first have the gospel preached to them, the Jews. The gospel must first be preached in Jerusalem to the Jews. Right? They seen Christ first. Christ was among them. Paul is in another city preaching to our people who were in that city and living in that city about Christ. And it says, it was necessary that the word of Elohim should first have been spoken to you. And that's why I said also that when Paul said in Acts 13:26 about not 26, Acts 13 and what we just read about the Jews rejecting Christ. That's why he said that. But he said it should have first been preached unto you. Hold on, where was I at? Let me go back. It said it should have first been preached unto you. But seeing that ye put it from you and judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life. This is important. Lo, we turn to the Gentiles. Right, and then it goes on to quote from Isaiah 49:6, which was a fulfillment of Paul's ministry for people who want to say God commanded us to be a light to the Gentiles. No, he commanded Paul to be a light to the Gentiles. Romans, the first chapter, confirms that. Look at what it says in Romans, the first chapter, real quick. Romans 1. It says, Paul, a servant of Yehoshua Mashiach, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of Elohim. Now look at this, which he had promised afore by his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. So Paul's ministry and Paul doing what he did, the work that he did, was prophesied of by the Holy Scriptures. That's where Isaiah 49:6 come from, and that's why he's quoting it right here, because he's fulfilling that. But look at what he told this Jew who was provoked to jealousy, right? Provoked to anger, provoked to envy, as he would put it. It says, it was necessary that the word of Elohim should first have been spoken to you, but seeing ye put it from you, right? So you reject the gospel, and as a result of rejecting the gospel, what do? You judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life. So by rejecting the gospel, they judge themselves unworthy of everlasting life, right? He was provoked to jealousy over the gospel and judged himself unworthy of everlasting life. But when we go back to Romans, hold on, let me go back. When we go back to Romans 11, we see, he says, I say then, how they stumbled that they should fall, Elohim forbid, but rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles for to provoke them to jealousy, right? In Acts 13, the Jew was provoked to envy and rejected and spoke against the word and judged himself unworthy of everlasting life. Romans 10:19, but I say, did not Israel know? First Moses said, I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with the foolish nation. So Romans 10:19 saying that they will be provoked to or moved to jealousy with those which are not a people. But Romans 11:11 say they will be provoked to jealousy by the Gentiles. So would it be safe to say that these and Romans 10:19, which are not a people, are these same Gentiles that's being spoke of here in Romans 11? Because this is something that's being fulfilled prophetically. What you got, Brother Yash? You there, bro?
Yeah, you caught me zoning out again, man. It's a lot, man, but it's simply right there, man. It's right there in your face, but like, who gonna just go? Who goes into synagogues on the Sabbath day to learn? He's calling them brethren.
Are these spiritual brethren?
Well, that's how they do their hocus pocus. They just spiritualize it. But Because that's just exactly what they did. They just spiritualized. I just, it's crazy because I can't, for one, I can't see how they missed it or because they're spiritualizing it because it's just right there, right in your face.
Brother T, I see you in the chat.
Hmm.
What's going on? So Romans 10 and 19 says that he's going to move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation, not with the nations. Right now, some people might, I haven't looked this up or anything. Some people might try to say this is speaking in a plural form, right? But for now, we're just going to read it for what it says until somebody can prove that. He says, I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. I will move them to jealousy with them which are not a people. Right? But verse 11 in Romans 11 is speaking of this same instance about them being moved or provoked to jealousy. But he's saying salvation is come to the Gentiles to provoke them to jealousy. Right? So when we read this, and we about to go to Deuteronomy 32, but when we read this, right, let me see. When we read Romans 10 and 19, and he talks about moving them to jealousy and moving them to anger, why is he moving them to anger or moving them to jealousy? And how is he going to move them to anger and jealousy? Right? Paul is explaining that right here. Why the Most High said what he said in Deuteronomy 32. Right? It's because they stumbled in unbelief at the preaching of the gospel. Right? But this gets deeper.
But hold on. You know what's funny though?
Go ahead.
Because even when you look at it like that today, it's like the same thing in reverse with those of us who's waking up and we get all the backlash we get. You know what I mean? Like everybody, you can be whatever you want to be, but the minute you say that you're an Israelite, now you can be anything but that. Now everybody got a problem. Especially our people.
Yep.
And not only that, it's like, and it was always in your face because that was one of the main things they always said was holding us back. You know, jealousy, Mugs being jealous. We've always been jealous, not me, ever, but people, listen, we've been jealous as a people against others. You know, you want to hold them back. That's why when Mugs make it and, you know, get a little bit of money or something, they move away from their people. Because you got too many, you got Mugs looking at you, want to rob. I'm saying that because as a Christian, that excuse, he gave it to us to make the Jews just. And I used to say, man, them people ain't jealous over us. Them people got all the money. Them
Yeah.
people running things. What do they got to be jealous of? And for that matter, it's any average heathen Gentile. They was living their best life. So, and that one used to never make sense to me. That one never made sense. Unless you line it up in light of, from the perspective of the truth.
Yeah. Well, if you be honest, a lot of people in the chat saying what you said, you know, we were never jealous of them.
No.
The Bible calls them our oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
So we were never jealous of them. And if you want to be technical, when we found out we were Israel, we saw where the jealousy was really coming from.
Right. They got jealous of us.
Like you say, it's all good until we found out who we were. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're using Christ, you know, as a means to not acknowledge the truth of who we are, saying it don't matter and all of that.
Right.
That's why y'all used to hear me say a while back, this provoking of jealousy and everything. This is talking about during that time.
Mm-hmm.
This ain't talking about our time. We living in a time where he said we will be scattered among our enemies and serving their gods. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's the dispensation of time we living in. We don't even know who Ephraim is today.
Right.
To be jealous.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he's the Puerto Rican.
Huh?
He's the Puerto Rican.
There you go. Let's just go by that, right?
Yeah.
Because they're quick to be saying you jealous.
And we ain't even jealous of that.
But you know, that's what we're dealing with. And so Paul is quoting from Deuteronomy 32, right? We see that Deuteronomy 32 is saying that I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. Now, who in the scripture was called not a people? We done been through this before. All right. Let's go to Isaiah 7. In verse 8, it says, for the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. And within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. All right. Not a people. I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. This is where applying the historical background come into play. Israel was a divided kingdom during the time of King David. That's when the nation split into two separate kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And this continued on all the way up, even to our time we in now, but well beyond and during the time of Christ and during the time of Paul, you still had the nation divided and split. Technically, the Most High hasn't brought Israel back together yet, but it's through Christ that we're all grafted back in. So all of Israel right now is redeemed through the blood of Christ, and we're awaiting the day of our redemption. Right? Christ just came to be the mediator of the new covenant through his blood. Now he's the mediator. And all who believe on him shall be saved. That all being contextual. But not a people. We see Ephraim was not a people. We see that the Most High gave let me see this real quick. I think it's let me see if I wrote this down. Jeremiah. Yeah, let's go there real quick. How do you become not a people if you were once the Most High's people? This is how right here. It says in Jeremiah 3:8, and I saw when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away and giving her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. This is the part that's going to place some significance in what we're dealing with tonight. When I ask y'all, did the Most High provoke them to jealousy to save them, or was it to destroy them? All right. So he gave Israel, which was Ephraim, the northern kingdom, a bill of divorce because they committed adultery by serving other gods, and then Judah followed after. So now let's go to Deuteronomy. Well, I don't have to do that here. I'll just go like this. Deuteronomy chapter 32. All right. I'm just going to read. I'm going to start at verse 7. Going to read a little bit. It says, remember the days of old and consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee, when the Most High divided the nations their inheritance, and when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. All right, so we're all one and we're all the same. Nah, he separated the sons of Adam. He gave each nation their inheritance. So nah, we're not all the same. All right, it says, for Yahweh's portion is his people. So after he separated the people and gave them their inheritance, we became the Most High's inheritance, and he our inheritance. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. All right. He found him in a desert land and in a waste, howling wilderness. He led him about, and he instructed him, and he kept him as the apple of his eye. He led him about and instructed him. All right. This is how we serve the Most High, by his instructions. It says, as an eagle stirreth up her nest, fluttered over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings, taketh them, beareth them on her wings. So Yahweh alone did lead them, and there was no strange Elohim with him. He made him to ride in the high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields, and he made him to suck honey out of the rock, and oil out of the flinty rock, butter of kine and milk of sheep, with fat of lambs and rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats with the fat of kidneys of wheat. And thou didst drink the pure blood of grapes. Nothing defiled, everything straight. Right? Now ain't nothing pure. It says, but Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. Thou art waxen fat. Thou art grown thick. Thou art covered with fatness. Then when he forsook Elohim, which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. This is giving you clues of what happened back when they was in the wilderness, when the Most High elevated Israel. This was their attitude toward the Most High. But notice this is Deuteronomy 32, right? They haven't made it out the wilderness yet, technically. So Deuteronomy 32 is prophetic. The Most High, through Moses, is speaking into the future, right? Like he called those things which be not as though they are. Lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. That's why Paul told them in 1 Corinthians 10 that be not ignorant of this thing, how our forefathers was in the wilderness and baptized unto Moses in the cloud in the wilderness, and how all ate that same spiritual meat and that same spiritual drink, and they drink from that spiritual rock, which was Christ. It was Christ the whole time, leading them through the wilderness, directing them and instructing them. And it says they lightly esteemed the rock of their salvation. They provoked him to jealousy with strange gods. With abominations provoked they him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils and not to Elohim who they knew not, to new Elohim that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Of the rock that beget thee, thou art unmindful, and hast forgotten Elohim that formed thee. All through Isaiah chapter 42, 43, 44, and 45, the Most High is letting Israel know that he is their maker, that he created them, that he sanctified them and chose them and justified them and glorified them. He said, I formed thee, and I'm paraphrasing this, even though thou hast not known me. Right? So that lines up with John when it says he created the world and he was in the world and the world knew him not. It says, of the rock that begat thee, thou art unmindful and hast forgotten Elohim that formed thee. And when Yahweh saw it, he abhorred them because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be, for they are a very forward generation, children in whom is no fate. Brother Yash, well, I'm gonna just go ahead and say it. I wanted to see, we reading something right here, and he's talking about a very forward generation, right? Very forward generation. That's singular.
Right.
Children in whom is no fate. So who would you say that this is referring to? Would this be referring to the Israelites prior of the days of old, or would this be specifically referring to another generation?
Well, this one is speaking in particular of a certain generation or another generation. However, it was still the effects of the accumulation of this same behavior from our people from the beginning all the way up to the end.
Agreed. So they were operating in the manner of our forefathers of the days of old. But notice the details here. He said it's a very forward generation, children in whom is no faith. Right? Children in whom is no faith. Paul mentions how when he was writing to the Romans, how they were kept under the law until the time that the faith was revealed. All right, so they were kept under the law, and when that faith came, then they were no longer under the law. Now they're under the faith and the grace. but they were kept under the law until the time that the faith reveals. So this is basically prophetically talking about the time of Christ and what happened as a result of their provoking the Most High to anger. And I'm gonna show you this even further. Children in whom is no faith. He said he will hide his face from them. Right? I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end will be. For they are a very forward generation, children in whom is no faith. Now let's read 21. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not Elohim. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities. And I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. Right? But prior to this verse, he said he was going to hide his face from them and see what their end going to be. In Acts 13, when the Jew rejected the gospel, he said that he judged himself unworthy of everlasting life. So we're talking about a specific generation who rejected Mashiach, and as a result of it, they had to pay for it. What was that payment? We're going to find out. It says, for a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn unto the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. All right. This don't sound like he was provoking them to jealousy to try to save them. Now, of course, within that time, like Paul said, if they continue not in unbelief, then they'll be grafted back in. But the purpose of why he was provoking him to jealousy is so that he could bring the judgments on them, the judgments that was set for that time, which was the end time, which was 70 AD. That's the end time destruction that came upon Jerusalem. He said, a fire shall burn unto the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundation of the mountains. He said, I will heap mischiefs upon them. I will spin mine arrows upon them, because they provoked him to jealousy. This is what he said he was going to do. He didn't say if. He said, this is what's going to happen. He said, I'm going to hide my face from them, and I'm going to see what their end is going to be. So the destruction of Jerusalem, we always look at the prophets, and we talk about the destruction of our time, which they talk about, but they also prophesied of the destruction of Jerusalem, which was the end time of that dispensation of time. That's why Christ wept over Jerusalem, because he was the last straw. That was the end, right? He said he gonna heap mischiefs upon them. I will spin mine arrows upon them. They shall be burnt with hunger and devoured with burning heat and with bitter destruction. I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them, and the poison of serpents of the dust. When did this happen? When did all of this happen? He said he will do this as a result of them provoking him to jealousy. First, he said he gonna provoke them to jealousy with a foolish nation. And we saw how that was done. It was through the gospel. Right? When Christ, when they asked him what was the sign of his coming and of the end of the world, he said that when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, to flee into the mountains. Don't come down to take anything out of your house. Flee into the mountains, right? Because these be the days of vengeance upon my people. This is what Deuteronomy 32 is setting us up for. That time. He said, watch this. He said, the sword without and terror within. I got all this underlined because I want you to pay attention to this terminology. The sword without and terror within shall destroy both the young man and the virgin, the suckling also with the man of gray hair. This is talking about during the time of the siege of Jerusalem. Then he said, I will scatter them into corners. I will make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. That's where your Psalms 83 come in. He scattered us out of our land. We lost our identities, our heritage, and our history. And all the nations conspired together to cause Israel to be of no more remembrance. Right? So Deuteronomy 32 is a prophecy dealing with what happened in Jerusalem with the Jews rejecting Christ, being provoked to anger and jealousy. And as a result of that, leading up to the time of 70 AD, when they were removed from the land. Now, let's go further. Remember all this terminology in Deuteronomy 32 of what he said he was going to do as a result of them provoking him. He turned the gospel away from them, right, and gave it to those which are not a people. Like, we could have went deeper in to show you who this is talking about, but Isaiah 7 will suffice. There's no other scripture in the Bible that refers to any other nation as not a people. Right? How could they be not a people if, they're still in their lands and still where the Most High designated them to be? But if you're in the Most High's land and you are his people, right, and he's your God, and he removes you from the land because you sin against him and scatters you among the lands, you become not a people. You're no longer tied to your origins. You are identified by where you sojourn or where you find yourself. You're not a people, just like today. So-called Negroes, we're not a people. We know that those of us who know who we are, but collectively, no, we're not a people. When the Most High looks at us as his people, then we're all on one accord serving him. He said you won't cease from being a nation before him, but right now we're in a scattered state. He hadn't restored us and brought us back together yet. Right? He said, I will scatter them into corners and will make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. Let's look at Ezekiel 5. He says, and thou, son of man, take thee a sharp knife, take thee a barber's razor, and cause it to pass upon thine head and upon thy beard. Then take thee balances to weight and divide the hair. Thou shalt burn with fire a third part in the midst of the city. And when the days of the siege are fulfilled, right, and thou shalt take a third part and smite about it with the knife, and a third part thou shalt scatter in the wind, and I will draw out a sword after them. Now remember what it said in Deuteronomy 32:25. A sword without and terror within shall destroy both the young man and the virgin, the suckling also with the man of gray hairs, right? He said, take a third in the midst of the city and burn it with fire. Take another third and smite it with a knife. That's 2/3. And then the 1/3 part scattered into the wind, and I'm going to send a sword after it. Thou shalt also take thereof a few in number, and bind them in thy skirts, and take of them again, and cast them into the midst of the fire, and burn them in the fire. For thereof shall a fire come forth into all the house of Israel. All the house of Israel. All right. 1/3 burnt with fire, another third cut with a knife, and then he scattered the last third part into the wind. Let's see what that's talking about. Thus said Adonai Elohim, this is Jerusalem. I have set it in the midst of the nations and countries that are round about her. And she hath changed my judgments into wickedness more than the nations, and my statutes more than the countries that are round about her. For they have refused my judgments and my statutes. They have not walked in them. All right. Talking about Jerusalem. Who was in Jerusalem? Talking about Judah. These are the things that Judah was doing. They changed the judgments of the Most High. You can see that in the days of the of Mashiach, with the scribes and Pharisees and so forth, contending with him. It says, therefore, thus said Adonai Elohim, because ye are multiplied more than the nations that are round about you, and have not walked in my statutes, neither have kept my judgments, neither have done according to the judgments of the nations that are round about you. Therefore, thus said Adonai Elohim, behold, I, even I am against thee, and will execute judgments in the midst of thee in the sight of the nations. So the Most High is going to judge Jerusalem. The main thing they did was they turned to idolatry. All right. They mimicked some of what Ephraim did. They built altars. They did all that kind of stuff. And the last straw was what they did with Christ. It says, and I will do in thee that which I have not done, and whereunto I will not do any more the like, because of all thine abominations. So he said, I'm going to do something in y'all that I never done. And after I do it, I'm not going to do it again. So much for everybody saying 2/3 of our people gonna fall off. Right? So much for people saying that 2/3 of our people are going to be judged and only a third going to be saved, or a remnant going to be saved. That's already been fulfilled. He's telling you right here. He said, I will do no more. I will not do any more the like, because of all thine abominations. I will do in thee that which I have not done, and whereunto I will not do any more the like, because of all thine abominations. Therefore the fathers shall eat the sons in the midst of thee, and sons shall eat their fathers, and I will execute judgments in thee, and the whole remnant of thee will I scatter into all the winds. All right. Let's see. Okay, we haven't got there yet. So we know that this happened during the siege of Jerusalem, right? When they were forced to eat their children because they couldn't get any food or water in or out of the city. They shut the city off from getting food and water. So the people went into starvation. This happened during the siege of 70 AD. He says, wherefore, as I live, said Adonai Elohim, surely because thou hast defiled my sanctuary with all thy detestable things, and with all thine abominations, therefore will I do, and therefore I will also diminish thee. Neither shall mine eye spare, neither will I have any pity. Right, so it's showing you why they provoked the Most High to jealousy and anger right here, by defiling the sanctuary, putting abominations and detestable things in the sanctuary. He said, that he will diminish them, and he will not spare nor have pity on them. A third part of these shall die with the pestilence, and with the famine shall they be consumed in the midst of thee. And a third part shall fall by the sword round about thee, and I will scatter a third part into all the winds, and will draw out a sword after them. Right? In Deuteronomy, he said, a sword without and terror within shall destroy both the young man and the virgin, the suckling also with the man of gray hairs. He said, I will scatter them into corners. I will make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. This is that 1/3, the four corners of the earth, or the four winds of heaven. That's where he scattered our people to. That's what Deuteronomy 32 is describing. And he said, I will draw out a sword after them. Thus shall mine anger be accomplished, and I will cause my fury to rest upon them, and I will be comforted. And they shall know that I, Yahweh, have spoken it in my zeal, when I have accomplished my fury in them. Why? Because they provoked him to jealousy with that which is not God. He said, moreover, I will make thee waste, and a reproach among the nations that are round about thee in the sight of all that pass by. So it shall be a reproach and a taunt, and an instruction and an astonishment unto the nations that are round about thee, when I shall execute judgments in thee in anger and in fury and in furious rebukes. I, Yahweh, have spoken it. And when I shall send upon them evil arrows of famine, which shall be for their destruction, and which I will send to destroy you, I will increase famine upon you, and will break your staff of bread. So he said, I'm going to send evil arrows, right? In Deuteronomy 32, he said, where is it at? I think he said he's going to spin his arrows on them. Where is it at? In verse 23, he said, I will heap mischiefs upon them. I will spin mine arrows upon them. They shall be burnt with hunger, right? And devoured with burning heat. That's why they eating their children. They eating their sons and daughters. In verse 10 of Ezekiel 5, he said he's going to burn them with hunger and devour with burning heat and with bitter destruction. He said, I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them with the poison of serpents of the dust. Right? So he said, I will increase a famine upon you and will break your staff of bread. So will I send upon you famine and evil beasts. And they shall bereave thee, and pestilence and blood shall pass through thee, and I will bring the sword upon thee. I, Yahuwah, have spoken it. So Ezekiel 5 is referencing and recalling what Moses spoke of in Deuteronomy 32. Right? This is how you know this is prophetic in Deuteronomy 32, and it was referring to a particular time and generation. Ezekiel 5 is detailing that. Right. If you go to the 7th chapter of Ezekiel, moreover, the word of Yahweh came unto me saying, Brother Yash, you want to jump in? You want to add something? We're just doing a lot of reading right now, just showing you what it meant when it said he was going to provoke them to jealousy. And by provoking them to jealousy, was it to save them or was it to destroy them? All right. That's how he provoked them to jealousy. This is an overall understanding of how you know you're dealing with our history as Israelites. All right. It says, moreover, the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, also, thou son of man, thus said Adonai Elohim unto the land of Israel. Watch this. It says, an end, right? The end is come upon the four corners of the land. So this was an end time, letting you know that this destruction prophesied of in the 5th chapter, this was the end. Now is the end come upon thee, and I will send mine anger upon thee, and will judge thee according to thy ways, and will recompense upon thee all thine abominations. Mine eyes shall not spare thee, neither will I have pity, but I will recompense thy ways upon thee, and thine abominations shall be in the midst of thee. And ye shall know that I am Yahuwah. Thus said Adonai Elohim, and evil, and only evil, behold, is come. An end is come. The end is come. It watcheth for thee. Behold, it is come. So this is a prophecy of the end, or the destruction of the land during that time. The morning is come unto thee, O thou that dwellest in the land. The time is come, the day of trouble is near, and not the sounding again of the mountains. Now will I shortly pour out my fury upon thee, and accomplish mine anger upon thee, and I will judge thee according to thy ways, and will recompense thee for all thine abominations. And mine eyes shall not spare, neither will I have pity. I will recompense thee according to thy ways and thine abominations that are in the midst of thee, and ye shall know that I am Yahweh that smited. He keeps reiterating how he's not going to pity them, how he's going to recompense them according to their ways. You know, excuse me. He keeps reiterating it. He said, behold, the day, behold, it is come. The morning is gone forth. The rod had blossomed. Pride has budded. All right. In other words, this thing is set in motion, and it's for a specific time, right? Violence is risen up unto a rod of wickedness. None of them shall remain, nor of their multitude, nor of any of theirs. Neither shall there be wailing for them. The time is come, the day draweth near. Let not the buyer rejoice, nor the seller mourn, for wrath is upon all the multitude thereof. For the seller shall not return to that which is sold, although they were yet alive. Right? For the vision is touching the whole multitude thereof, which shall not return. Neither shall any strengthen himself in the iniquity of his life. He said, I'm gonna scatter you into corners, right? And I'm gonna scatter you into the wind. It says they have blown the trumpet even to make all ready, but none goeth to the battle. For my wrath is upon all the multitude thereof. All right. You can read about prophecy where it talks about how the priests during that time prophesied good things unto the people. Right, but it wasn't from the Most High. It says the sword is without, and the pestilence and the famine within, just like Deuteronomy 32. The sword without and terror within. The sword is without, and the pestilence and the famine within. He that is in the field shall die with the sword, and he that is in the city, famine and pestilence shall devour him. But they that escape of them shall escape, and shall be on the mountains like the doves of the valleys, all of them mourning, every one for his iniquity. Right? When Christ said, when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, where did he tell them to flee to? He said to flee into the mountains. Right? Verse 16 in Ezekiel 7, but they that escape of them shall escape, and shall be on the mountains like doves of the valley, all of them mourning, everyone for his iniquity. All hands shall be feeble, and all knees shall be weak of water. They shall also gird themselves with sackcloth, and horror shall cover them. Right? Because it was a horrible time. Imagine having to go through that. Or imagine having children and you not being able to give your children, your suckling children, the substance they need, the sustenance. Right? In order for you, a woman, to feed a child, from her breast, she got to be fed, but ain't nothing to eat. Right? So now you got this baby screaming and hollering because they hungry and you can't feed them. You hungry. Things happen. It says, and shame shall be upon all faces, and baldness upon all their heads. They shall cast their silver in the streets, and their gold shall be removed. Their silver and their gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of wrath of Yahweh. So this was the day of wrath on Jerusalem. They shall not satisfy their souls, neither fill their bowels, because it is the stumbling block of their iniquity. As for the beauty of his ornament, he is set in majesty, but they made the images of their abominations and their detestable things therein. Therefore have I set it far from them. It says, I will give it into the hands of the strangers for a prey, and to the wicked of the earth for a spoil, and they shall pollute it. My face will I turn also from them, and they shall pollute my secret place, and the robbers shall enter into it and defile it. It's 70 AD all day long. It says, make a chain, for the land is full of bloody crimes, and the city is full of violence. Wherefore I will bring the worst of the heathen. Right? I will bring the worst of the heathen. This was talking about the Romans. And they shall possess their houses, and I will also make the pomp of the strong to cease, and their holy place shall be defiled. Destruction cometh, and they shall seek peace, and there shall be none. Mischief shall come upon mischief, and rumor shall be upon rumor. Then shall they seek a vision of a prophet, but the law shall perish from the priests, and counsel from the ancients. The king shall mourn, and the prince shall be clothed with desolation, and the hands of the people of the land shall be troubled, and I will do unto them after their way, and according to their deserts will I judge them, and they shall know that I am Yahweh. This is Deuteronomy 32. That was just Ezekiel chapter 7, but all this, Ezekiel chapter 5, Ezekiel 7, is detailing what we read right here in Deuteronomy 32. Everything he said he's going to do, because they provoked him to jealousy with strange gods and with their abominations. First, the gospel message that was sent to them, they rejected it. And because of that, it was given to the Gentiles, right? Which were their brethren who were among the nations, uncircumcised. Just simply put, they were looking for the restoration of the kingdom during that time, but it wasn't for that time. Instead, because of their unbelief, the Most High brought judgments on the city. You got anything to add, Brother Yash? Say because that's some people's belief based on behavior, which is Christian belief. You there, Brother Yash? All right. Let me see. So this was Deuteronomy 32. We were in Romans chapter 10, verse 19, and Romans chapter 11, verse 11. Right? In Romans 10 and 19, he said he was going to provoke them to jealousy with them which are not a people. But in Romans 11 and 11, he said that they will be provoked to jealousy because salvation has come unto the Gentiles. So these Gentiles in Romans 11:11 and not a people in Romans 10:19 are the same thing, right? They're the same thing. Hosea 8:8 will confirm that how Ephraim is swallowed up, Israel is swallowed up. They are among the Gentiles as a vessel wherein is no pleasure, which is why the gospel message of redemption and repentance had to go and be preached among the Gentiles, because the Most High's people were among the Gentiles. The gospel message was never for anybody else, non-Israelites, because the gospel message was already set in stone from the prophets. That's what they had to refer back to. So was the Most High provoking them to jealousy to save them, or was it to bring destruction on them? Let's go to one more place. Psalm 69. Because Paul quoted from this in Romans 11 as well. Verse 22 says, let their table become a snare before them, and that which should have been for their welfare, let it become a trap. That which would have been for their welfare, let it become a trap. Let their eyes be darkened, that they see not, and make their loins continually to shake. All right. All because they provoked them to jealousy. Now, this is talking about the time of Christ. All right. If you read up before this, this is dealing with the crucifixion. It says, pour out thine indignation upon them, and let thy wrathful anger take hold of them. Then we read about that in Deuteronomy 32, Ezekiel 5, and Ezekiel 7, the indignation that he took out on them because they rejected Christ. They were in unbelief. It says, let their habitation be desolate, and let none dwell in their tents. Right? For they persecute him whom thou hast smitten. Right? Then the Most High said, it pleased him. It pleased the Lord to bruise him in Isaiah 53 concerning Christ. But they persecuted him. It says, and they talked to grief of those whom thou hast wounded. Add iniquity unto their iniquity, and let them not come into thy righteousness. This is what David is saying concerning that generation that rejected Christ. We're going to show you too why Christ said what he said in another place, because he's saying it right here. Add iniquity unto them iniquity, and let them not come into thy righteousness. Let them be blotted out of the book of the living, and not be written with the righteous. He said, let them be blotted out. In other words, let them be erased from the book of the living, and not be written with the righteous. Right? Why is he saying this? It's because they provoked the Most High to jealousy, and David is pronouncing a strict judgment on them for what they did. Let's go to where is that? I think it's Mark. Hold on. Because I had two places for this, but I want to get this one. Let me see. Okay. Excuse me. Let me see. Because notice what it's saying. It said, let them be blotted out of the book of the living. Right. Let me see. I want Luke. Do I want Luke 13? Because this is for a specific generation. All right. Let me see. It says, Luke 13:28, there should be weeping and gnashing of teeth when ye shall see Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the prophets in the kingdom of Elohim, and you yourselves thrust out. And they shall come from the east and from the west and from the north and from the south, and shall sit down in the kingdom of Elohim. All right. Let me see. Hold on real quick. Okay, yeah, that's another place. It said there should be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you shall see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the prophets in the kingdom of Elohim, and you yourselves thrust out. Right? In other words, you're gonna be kicked out, but all your forefathers, right, and all of these people that's coming from the east, west, north, and south to sit down in the kingdom, and behold, there are last which shall be first, and there are first which shall be last, because the kingdom, the gospel of the kingdom first came unto them. Right? We will be considered last, those of us scattered. The gospel is for our behalf, so we're awaiting now the redemption of the Most High, and he's saying he's gonna pretty much shine his light on us in front of all the nations. So that's the last being the first and the first being made last. Let me go to Matthew real quick. All because they provoked the Most High to jealousy. This is what he said what happened to them. Mark 8:12. It says, no, I'm going to start at verse 11. It says, and I say unto you that many shall come from the east and west and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, but the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Right? Many shall come from the east, west, and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom, but the children of the kingdom shall be cast out. This is another place they bring you to say, see, Israelites, just because you're an Israelite, don't mean you're going to be in the kingdom, because you got many coming from the east, west, north, and south. Let's see who these many are that's coming from the east, west, north, and south. Because everything is written in the prophets. Everything is written in the prophets. By the time you read from Genesis to Malachi, the whole gospel has already been told and established. That's why I tell you that the beginning of the gospel of Yehoshua Mashiach, as it is written in the prophets. Isaiah 43, let's see who these many coming from the east, west, north, and south. But now, thus said Yahweh that created thee, O Jacob, and he that formed thee, O Israel. Right? I thought he created all mankind. Right? Which he did. But why is he singling out Israel? For the same reason he said, told Abraham that in Isaac shall his seed be called. Right? The Most High is only recognizing Israel. The Most High told Abraham that Isaac was his only son. He called Ishmael the son of the flesh, and he called Isaac the seed of the promise. He says, fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by thy name, thou art mine. Right? So we Most High speaking to Israel here. So let's skip down to see who this is coming from all these different places, north, south, east, and west. It says, fear not, for I am with thee. I will bring thy seed from the east and gather them from the west. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, keep not back. Bring my sons from far and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Isaiah 49:6 says, I will also give thee to be a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation to the end of the earth. Because that's where the Most High's people are in this dispensation of time. They scattered to the ends of the earth. Bring my sons from far. Why? Because he scattered Israel among the nations. He said, I'm going to sift you out among the nations. I'm going to scatter you into the four corners. I'm going to scatter you into the wind. Right? I'm going to remove you out of the land and scatter you among the lands of your enemies. And you're going to serve their gods. But right here, he said that he's bringing them back from the north, south, east, and west. That's where all of our people are. Even everyone that is called by my name, for I have created him for my glory. I have formed him. Yea, I have made him. All right. Bring forth the blind people that have eyes and the deaf that have ears. Talking about the people who can't understand the truth. People who can't see the truth. Right. It's like he said, well, that's a different context, but just like he said, some of Israel was blinded, right? And they couldn't comprehend the light. If you blind, right? If you're in a dark place, right? If you're in a dark room and the light come on and you don't know that a light is on, that means you must be blind. You have to be blind in order to not know that a light is on when the light shines in a dark room or a dark place. You blinded, and spiritually, our people were blinded from the fact of who Mashiach was. That's why Paul said that the only way you can confess Christ to be the Son of God is through the Holy Spirit. Right? People think that's arbitrary. But I'm not going to even get into that right now. That's something else. But if you're confessing Christ to be the Son of God, then you are confessing him to be God. Biblically, that's what that means. He's the Son of God because if you have a son, how can your son not be what you are? Right? Your son is going to grow and become what you are, and he's going to become equal to you, or he's going to surpass you in an earthly sense. Right? Most of us who have sons, we want our sons to surpass where we are. But in the case with the Most High, the most that could be done is you being made equal to him. Because that's his son. He can do that. So what does that make him by default? Right? Bring forth the blind people that have eyes and the deaf that have ears. All these Christians, these Christian apologists, they got eyes, but they blind. They got ears, but they can't hear. The things that we speak of irritates them because it doesn't include them. Just like the gospel message that it doesn't include us. It replaces us. It says, let all the nations be gathered together and let the people be assembled. Who among them can declare this? Right? All these Christian apologists, ask them why the Most High is bringing judgment on the nations now. The Most High made it simple. Everybody can see that the nation's being judged, but tell them to tell you why these judgments are happening and see if they can declare that. Why is the Most High judging all the nations right now? Where his people are, right? His people are in all the nations. He say, who among them can declare this and show us former things, right? Who among them can declare the word of the Most High, and who among them can show you former things? We know they can't show you former things, right? Because it's all about the New Testament with them. So how can they show you things of old when they're not familiar with the things of old? They try to keep you from going to the things of old. It says, let them bring forth their witnesses that they may be justified, or let them hear and say it is truth. In other words, if they can't bring forth nobody as a witness to declare the things of the Most High and why these things are happening in the earth now, let them hear, right? In order for you to hear, it means you got to be quiet, right? That's just a nice way of saying that. Let them hear. For people who say we don't have the fruits of the Spirit, that might be a way to start saying that instead of telling people to shut up, right? Man, just hear. You need to hear. Let them hear and say it is truth. See, ye are my witnesses, said Yahuwah, and my servant whom I have chosen, that ye may know and believe and understand that I am he. Before me there was no Elohim formed, neither shall there be after me. I, even I, am Yahuwah, and beside me there is no Savior. Who is our Savior? This is letting you know who this is speaking. Who this is speaking. Who's our Savior? But this is who's coming from the north, south, east, and west when you read that Matthew 8 and 31. But the focus was that generation and what happened to them as a, not Matthew 8 and 31, but Matthew 8 and 11 and 12. He said that generation will be cast out into outer darkness. They won't see the kingdom. And that's why David said what he said concerning that generation. Moses said what he said all through the prophets. I just read Ezekiel. All right, you got Isaiah, you got Jeremiah. They all speak of, and Zechariah, all speak of the destruction of Jerusalem. All speak of the 2/3 being destroyed and the 1/3 being scattered. We are the descendants of that, the 1/3. So the question still remains, when the Most High said he was going to provoke them to anger and jealousy, was it to save them or was it to destroy them? Right. And that's what leads us to this Romans 11. You know, Romans 11:11 says that they will be provoked to jealousy. Romans 11:14 says that by any means I may provoke them to emulation, them which are my flesh. Now, last time we dealt with this, we showed how this punctuation in here pretty much takes over in terms of the rules that should be followed whenever this punctuation is present. According to this punctuation, the colon, Whenever you have a sentence that precedes the colon, the sentence that comes after it pretty much details or gives a further description of the sentence that came before it. So verse 13 to 14 are one thought. Paul is speaking to Gentiles. He said, I speak to you Gentiles, and as much as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. All right, now I was told that I can't understand pronouns, right? But it's not about understanding or not understanding pronouns. It's about understanding the rules of punctuation. Clearly, we see what the pronouns are, right? You Gentiles, right? Then down here, you see the word them, right? So once again, when you look at the rules of punctuation, this sentence is pretty much a description of this sentence, right? That's an arrow. Look like a palm tree, but it's an arrow. Y'all forgive me. But, 14 is a description of verse 13. And some people might ask, well, if that's the case, why is he saying you Gentiles in verse 13? Then down here, he's saying them, right? And I would pretty much chalk that up to how things are written and interpreted in the Bible. Think about it, right? Matter of fact, let me go there. Let me go there. Hold on. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. And this will be the last place on this, y'all, I promise. All right, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Like, why is it worded like this? Why in this sentence is he saying, I speak to you Gentiles, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, right? Let's just act like this punctuation not even here, because you have to follow that. And in other versions, for other versions of the Bible, this word emulation is replaced with the word jealousy, right? But how does that line up with what we read and what we did with the verse 11, showing the being provoked to jealousy and what the purpose of that was? The purpose of provoking them to jealousy was to bring an end to that generation. He said he was going to hide his face from them and see what their end was going to be. But down here, he's talking about provoking to emulation them which are his flesh. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 9 and 21. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. I'm going to start at verse 19. It says, for though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. All right. He's free from all men, right? Let's pay close attention. He's free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. Now watch this. Unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. But I thought Paul was a Jew. All right. I thought Paul was a Jew. He said, to the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. Right? right? But weren't the Jews the ones who were under the law? He said, I became as the Jews, right, that I might gain the Jews, right? Now, once again, you see a semicolon here, which pretty much follows the same rules as the colon to a degree. That I might gain the Jews, to them that are under the law as under the law. Paul was raised as a Pharisee under the law. So this would be another description of the Jews. He started out with the Jews. He started out by saying all men. Then he said, unto the Jews I became as a Jew. Then he described the category of the Jews, which was under the law. Those were the only ones who were under the law during that time, the Jews, that I might gain them that are under the law. Then he says, to them that are without law, as without law, not being without law to Elohim, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without law, right? A lot of people might read this without law and think this is talking about non-Israelites, because they were without law. They didn't have the law, right? They will admit that they didn't have the law. So they were without law, right? But look at this. Look at 2 Chronicles chapter 15. I'm going to read one verse. It says, now for a long season, Israel had been without the true Elohim, right? In Ephesians, he told them, ye were without God in the world, right? And without a teaching priest. And it says, and without law. This was during the time of King Asa, after the kingdom had split up. It says, for a long season, Israel had been without the true Elohim, and without a teaching priest, and without law. Right? So Paul said in 1 Corinthians 9, once again, he said he made himself free from all men, right? Yet have he made himself a servant. But then he went on to describe pretty much Israelites who were under the law and those who were without law. Then he says, to the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men. Who is the all men in this context? Israel during this time was a weak nation. They were pretty much in subjection. They didn't have an army, right? That I might by all means save some. You're not a strong nation if you don't have a strong defense. That's how you measure a nation's strengths and weaknesses, right? Israel didn't have a king during that time or a defense. So when you read, how things are worded, why would he say he's to the Jews, I became as the Jews, when he was a Jew? To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that's under the law. To them that are without law, right? Still talking about Israelites. He became as they were. He said he became all things to all men, but he described pretty much Israelites. So it's how things are worded, right? Don't take away from the foundation of who's being written to or spoken to. It's how things are being worded. But to provoke them to jealousy, I would say that according to the Bible, the reason he was provoking them to jealousy is because they provoked him to jealousy and didn't repent. So he sent his son Christ to redeem them and to try to convert them through the gospel, and they rejected that, which was prophesied of. It was prophesied that they would do that to the Son, but that was the last straw. Once they did that, that's what brought about the destruction of 70 AD. And when they said his blood be on us and on our children, that's why I always say that whether you're an Israelite, if you are an Israelite, whether you know it or not, right? You don't have to know that you're an Israelite. But whether you know it or not, and whether you believe it or not, we are all under the blood of Christ, right? His blood was the payment or the redemption in order to bring us back. There's going to be a time when we're going to have to meet the Most High face to face, right? And it's at that point that he's going to determine who is who's going to stay, who's going to remain, who will be purged out based on whatever reason. Because he didn't spare that last generation that didn't believe on him. And so the rebels, he said, be purged out in the wilderness. But that's all because of his sacrifice and his payment. All judgment is given unto him. So we're not even, the times we're in now, these end times dealing with the end of the Gentile rulerships, it's not even about whether you believe on Christ or not. Not saying that you shouldn't, but us being delivered out of this condition is not predicated on whether we believe in Christ or not. It's already set. It's in our own best interest if we do. It'll benefit us if we do. But when most people say they believe on Christ, you got to question which Christ you believe in. Because you got another Jesus out there, another Christ, with another gospel and another spirit. Right? All of us were under that Christ. Christianity is just a fulfillment of what the Most High said about us serving the gods of our enemies. Christianity is how Christ said they draw nigh to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain they worship me, teaching for doctrine the commandments of men. That's what Christianity is. It's vain worship. And it's being revealed more and more every day. It's vain worship. It's more self-appropriation for white Christians. It's replacement theology or supersessionism, whichever you want to call it. Right? It's all of that. It's how white people pretty much do what they've always been doing, self-appropriating whatever they want and making it their own, excluding who was originally involved or who it originally pertained to, and replacing them with themselves. That's why a lot of them believe that the ancient Egyptians was white, which was probably one of the stupidest things to believe. It's because they replace everything else with themselves, and that's what Christianity is. They took our records and twisted them and squeezed themselves into it. And they want us to believe that the Most High provoked us to jealousy with them. Right? He didn't say he was going to provoke us to jealousy with our enemies and with our oppressors. He said he would provoke us to jealousy with them which are not a people. You can't say that they can't say that they're not a people or a nation of people. That doesn't apply to them. And as a result of us provoking the Most High to jealousy, he provoked our people to jealousy with the gospel, which that applied once again to that particular time. That's not talking about our time. That's not talking about our position, our particular dispensation of time. We're living in a time where our people are waking up back to who we are. Remember, he said, I'm going to cause the remembrance of you to cease. The nations conspired together, you know, through their institutions, through their religions, through their propagandas, through their ways of life that they made us subject to. They caused us to forget who we are. Now we're waking up to who we are. That's the era that we're in now in prophecy. When the Most High said that when you call these things to mind, the blessing and the curse among all the nations where I scattered you, right? When he said, in the land of your enemies, you shall remember yourselves and turn back to the paths of righteousness. That's the dispensation of time that we living in. But to provoke them to jealousy was for their time, and it was for the destruction of Jerusalem, which was the end time of that era. The end time during that time. 70 AD was the end of Israel as a whole. Now we are the scattered that's coming from the north, south, east, and west to see our forefathers in the kingdom, which was promised. And so I hope that was helpful. I'm going to be revisiting Romans 11 again, because Romans 11 is kind of profound, you know. But all praises to Yah, the great Elohim of Israel. If you haven't already, hit the like buttons and the subscribe button. Visit trueebri.com. Shout out to the brothers, you know, Brother Yash, Brother Kadar, Josiah. Shout out to them. That's pretty much all I have on this, man, to provoke them to jealousy. If y'all got any thoughts, feel free to put them in the comment section. And for those who listen to this on the playback, you know, same thing. Leave your thoughts in the comment section and everything, and we'll get to you as time permits. But thank y'all once again for your time. Shalom and blessings. All praise to Yah. See y'all on the next one.
What up, Pete? What up, Pete? What up, Pete?